Okay, so recording is on. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Yep.
It hasn't come up for me yet.
Okay.
Yeah, there it
Okay,
is.
there it is.
Okay, cool. So basically what I wanted to do was on this meeting was just to kind of go over the Octopus deploy tool and talk about kind of how we're going to be using it to do deployments of our apps in production, and actually to all of our environments in the LM environment. And I just wanted to kind of give you guys a walkthrough of that and an overview of actually kind of the whole flow of how everything happens. After a commit into default, what kind of happens from there, and follow that change all the way to production. So uh, here is the main tool. This is the main dashboard for the tool, and what you'll see is actually each project is on the left. And then you have the environments across the top, and it tells you actually what version is deployed in each environment. And so it'll track per environment what is actually out there. One of the things with Octopus, yes, we can actually define out these different environments and say that these are kind of separated and have separate versions on them. We can come in here and see which actual computers are in the different environments. We're going to be adding the production and DR servers down here, so there's 5 each of those two. And I think at some point we maybe actually added another step in here. There's a QC servers that may be going in here between dev and staging. But the good thing is that if we have this tool, it won't be painful for us to add another step if we have to in here, because it's the same exact deployment process. So Octopus allows you to define these different environments to say, okay, these are different kind of segregated things. They'll have their own versions of the projects deployed. We can also define life cycles. And so the life cycle basically just says that when you deploy to development, let me back up one second. What the life cycle allows you to do is say this is the order that software goes, or deployments go from development to staging to production to DR. So it kind of enforces that you can't just deploy something straight to production. It has to be deployed successfully to each of the lower environments and then be promoted up, is just to make sure that everything goes through the same process in the same pipeline. So what this allows us to do, so we have phase 1 is development, and then it can be promoted to staging, which can only deploy to the staging environment. Then it'll get promoted to production. Excuse me one second. It'll get promoted to production, and then once that code is, that release is in production, it could actually be deployed to production or disaster recovery.
Hey, Dave, you might go
Yep.
into this later, but what is staging for?
Staging, so the idea for staging right now, and right now it's used for basically a final smoke test before we push to production. So it's as close to production as we can get, and it allows us to test not only that the software works, but also that our deployment process works. So at LN, it's usually just making sure that whatever we're using to deploy works in staging, so we can test it there to say that yes, we tested this process, and then we can do that same process on production.
Would that be necessary once we have a QC stage?
So that's why we don't have it in here right now. I've been told that LN uses that extra QC step. I know our team is a little bit different. I think we're trying to pull a QC person into the team as Sharma,
Yeah.
that will be doing QC kind of during the, as things are going through review. We have testing of each change. But in a standard kind of waterfall deployment model, you're going to have a QC step, and we would push something to QC when we're ready for the QC team to go and beat on it. And then they would say, okay, thumbs up or thumbs down. Okay, we got one person waiting in the lobby. Let me admit them. Maybe that's Ken. Ken Burke. Welcome, sir. So yeah, QC would be used to basically say that this software now is available for that team to go and beat on and to do a testing. And then staging is another step past that. That is testing basically the deployment process.
I see. Okay.
And then production and DR. Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's the life cycle capability in here. You can actually say that things have to go. So something has to be deployed to development before it can go to stage and before it can go to production. And Ken, we were just talking about we're probably gonna. I've heard that we may be throwing another step in here of having a QC step in between dev and staging. So we'd actually end up with 5 environments plus local dev. So yeah, this lets. It looks like Ken Bray actually just got online, so he should be getting on here in a minute. That's the life cycle definition that kind of allows you to say how things have to be promoted through the software life cycle. The way Octopus works, you have this master server. This is actually a NuGet server, and all of the deployment packages are actually just NuGet packages, which is basically a zip file. And so it has its own built-in NuGet package repository. And the way we actually integrate with this, we have Team City creating these packages. Every default build creates these packages and then pushes those into Octopus. Octopus then keeps track of, and we name them the same as the projects. So like you'll recognize these are names of some projects in IPA. You'll see that it tracks the version, the latest version that's been pushed up, and we have a little note in here of when it was actually built. And so that's kind of how the Team City integration happens on the between Team City and Octopus. If I go and look at Team City, if we dig into this continuous integration step on here, and we go to the actual build step, just give it a minute, it'll come up. The way Octopus creates the packages is actually really simple. We've had to do a lot more cleanup work in IPA to kind of support this, but on regular projects, like non-legacy projects, it's really simple to actually do this. All you have to do is actually add a NuGet package to the project. So for like authorized transaction, the website project for it, we added a NuGet package called Octopack. And what that does is it just adds a targets file to the CS proj, and then when you build it, you can pass in these parameters to MS Build, and this will tell it to actually kick off and create the package. So basically, we do it on the entire solution because there's additional web services and things like that. So each of the projects that's kind of like an end project, a website, a web service, a Windows service, a console app, would have this Octopack NuGet package added to it, and then it will respond to these parameters that we can pass on MS Build. This run Octopack is a true false, and so we just have it only creating packages on the default branch. And then the package version, we're actually setting that to just the same as the build version. So if we go back and look at in Team City, this is 1.1.144 was the last default build, and that should be what we have in Octopus, 1.1.144. So we can kind of trace back to a Team City build from the package. After these are created, what ends up happening here, so they actually show up in the artifacts. So we have all these NuGet packages, and at the end, or after this continuous integration step is successful, we have this push deployment packages to Octopus build step, and this just runs. It has a dependency on the continuous integration step, grabs the artifacts from there, and actually just does one thing, this NuGet publish step that pushes it to the Octopus server. So this is just a built-in feature of Team City that we can push a NuGet package out when we're done, or at any point as a build step. And yeah, for upload, I think we just do start a new package. So any NuGet packages that we get built in that IPA continuous integration build will get pushed to Octopus. Let me switch back to Octopus. Any questions so far on kind of that process, how that integration happens between Team City and Octopus? Cool. So once the packages are here, I mean, if we actually go and looked into one of these packages, this might be kind of helpful. So I take like the admin portal website. These NuGet packages are basically a zip file, and so that's why Team City, you can actually just open them up like this. And so you could basically take this and rename it to a zip file and unzip it to the web folder for admin portal, and it would work. And so that's basically what is all in the package. It's just basically a zip file of the the application root for that application. It's all these are web services, but for scheduled console apps or Windows Service would be the same thing. So let's switch back to Octopus. So now that the packages are over here, if we look at the actual projects, let me go and pull up, say, like authorized transaction. This thing is going to record every deployment. We actually automatically deploy to development every time that a commit happens in default. And so our dev server will always, I've sent it out on the port job, we have all of our sites set up there and deploying locally on the dev server, so we can hit those. It'll show you whatever the latest default is. This kind of just shows you each of those and what happened during these different deployments of this project. The process piece in here, this is basically the configuration. So how do you actually take this package, this zip file, and on a machine and actually get it deployed and get it configured and working? And so there's a couple different pieces to this. For authorized transaction, this one is more complicated because we have all these dependent web services. And so we're actually deploying 9 things when we say deploy authorized transaction. We're actually going to be moving away from this model of having everything bundled inside of it, and we'll probably just have one project for internal web services, another project for like the LEMS web services, and we'll probably just group these together and then pull them out of here. So really, authorized transaction will eventually just be deploying the website. We deploy the website, and then basically the rest of this is just IIS configuration. And so we will create an application pool in IIS, or potentially if it's already there, it'll just update it. So if we need to change, say we upgrade one of these to like .NET 4, we could come in here and change the configuration for this app pool and say this app pool is actually, now it's .NET 4 or it's .NET 2 or whatever. And that next time it deploys, it'll make sure that the configuration for that app pool on the IIS side is set up how it's supposed to be. So the deploy step on here, you basically tell it the NuGet package that you want to deploy. We'll get into configuration in a little bit, but it does some things with configuration and with transforms. Some of you guys have been in the reviews I was doing on the admin portal and authorized transaction packaging. We'll recognize we have those the configuration files for each of the environments, and they're under source control. And the way that this does, it does these XML transforms, but we can get into that in a little bit. Basically, it's making sure that we have the correct configuration settings in the web config for that particular environment that you're deploying to. There's another step in here, or not a step, but it's another thing as part of the deployment. There's kind of like a shortcut where you can just say, just create me a website and an app pool. And we do that, we have that box checked. So we create an authorized transaction website in IIS and then app pool and set up the bindings. So that's on actually defining out kind of the steps. So if we look at just like authorized transaction on the website itself, so you have this thing that tells it to unzip the file and set up an IIS website pointing to that folder that you unzipped it to. In the LN environment, our sites are set up slightly more complicated because we have the load balancer. So when we talk about we deploy out to, say, production, we'll have a website in IIS. It might be actually easier if I show you what I'm talking about while I'm doing this. In IIS, we have a website for authorized transaction, and this kind of gets into some of the network things of how we have the load balancer set up. We have a binding here, and it's on all of the servers. So we only have 2 of these staging servers, but on both of those, IIS is only listening for that website to this host name. So you have to go through kind of the load balancer to hit the website part of IIS. The problem with only setting that up is there's not a way for us to hit one specific server for like testing or troubleshooting. So you don't know which one you're actually hitting. You're going to go to this address, and it's going to go to either QINF012 or 013. And if you need to test on a specific one, you can't. And so what we actually do is, so we have it set up as a website, a website by itself in IIS, but then we also have it mapped as a subfolder under the default website. So if I go to the AT subfolder here, this is pointing to the same folder as the authorized transaction website. So these are both pointing to the same thing. And basically, that extra kind of piece of configuration that we have to do is why we have this extra kind of step down here, create an IIS application for it. And that in here is where we say, under the default website, the path is AT, and it should be wherever you extracted that NuGet package to. This is just a variable that you can get from this list of a bunch of different things, but one of them is where it deployed the output package installation path. And we say, use the app pool for the authorized transaction. It's the same app pool that we use for the actual website, and just put it under the default website. So if you think about this process thing, it's basically custom scripting, but visual kind of, and with, you don't actually have to write PowerShell. And so you have kind of it's a visual scripting type of thing. And you have these reusable little snippets of code. So like if you have to create an IIS application, if you have to create an app pool, the deploy stuff is built in. One of the things that's actually kind of neat about this is we can go into, I think it's called step templates. Yeah. So these are all ones that I've added in here, but there's 100 of them in this community library that do a bunch of different things, and these are all just like little PowerShell scripts that have parameters that do like one specific thing. Like if we have to do something on the file system, if we have to create a directory or delete a folder or move something or interact with source control, do IIS stuff. So I've had to add all of these IIS ones that we've needed to do configuration. There's some stuff on F5 load balancers and disable a member, wait for connections to drop. We may end up using that in production to kind of communicate with the load balancer to say, hey, we're rolling out. We need to take this server down, wait for all the traffic to take it off the load balancer, wait for the traffic to die off, and then we can deploy there and then put it back on. So all these website pieces, different SQL things. There's just a lot. Windows service, Windows scheduled task. I grabbed a bunch of the ones that I think we're going to need once we start getting into like the crash export services and things like that. So I have the ones in here for scheduled task and service. But yeah, if we look into one of these, if you actually just click and say, I want this find and replace one, it tells you exactly how to do it. So you hit copy to clipboard, it has this PowerShell script that copies, and then you say import here and paste the whole thing. And it tells you, okay, this is the script that you have and these parameters and etc. I think this was a find and replace thing. But yeah, but if we want to do custom PowerShell scripts, we can as a like reusable template that we can do and include into multiple projects. So that's one of the pieces of it. And so yeah, the process piece of here, this is one of the more time-consuming pieces, but it should be a one-time thing. We get this set up, and then it should be just kind of minor tweaks here and there as we need to.
Hey Dave, I got a question.
Yeah.
So this is all PowerShell. How do they get down to the actual machines, the servers that are?
So
yeah.
Yeah, so basically the architecture of this is really similar to TeamCity. And so you have this master Octopus server that's basically like our TeamCity server. And then when we looked at environments, each of these machines, you install the Octopus agent, which is called a tentacle.
I see.
Because the whole Octopus thing.
Yes, clever.
So you have one Octopus, you have multiple tentacles, and each tentacle is basically just listening for the Octopus server to tell it to do something.
I see.
And the Octopus server will push down. We'll walk through. I'll show you a task log of kind of how when you push something, you can actually see in pretty good detail. Actually, I'll just show it to you now of what it's actually doing. So you kind of have the high level of, this was a deployment I was testing yesterday for the analytics stuff. But you can see that, okay, it's telling the tentacle to download the package. Or actually, I guess it uploads it to the tentacle. So the Octopus one uploads the package to the tentacle, and and then tells it to run this deployment script. And it goes and does its things. It's looking to kind of like match things in the configuration files. This is it touching all kind of the IIS stuff. It says,
Is
oh,
that
go ahead.
is the tentacle reporting that back, or is there some kind of like real-time interaction between the server and the tentacle?
Yeah, there's real-time interaction between the two.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do a deployment.
No, I'm just more curious. I mean, at a high level. I mean, sure, show us.
So there's real-time communication at that point. And so when you kick off a deployment, it shows like a progress bar on here, and you can sit there and watch the task log happen in real time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's how the communication happens and how they upload the packages. So yeah, so the process thing is basically visual scripting, but it should be a one-time thing. It's basically like configuring build steps in TeamCity, but instead of build, it's deployment. And how do you get this thing working out there? This is where we actually configure to tell it that whenever a package gets pushed into the NuGet repository, it'll automatically create a release, and we actually have it automatically auto-deploying to dev. And so that's that box right there, and checking that box. And because it's multiple NuGet packages, you have to tell it the last one that's going to get pushed in. So TeamCity will actually do an alphabetical order, and so I picked the last one here. So whenever Webmaster Service gets pushed in, it'll create a release, which will be the latest version of all of these packages, and push it to dev. So we can talk about releases. There is a distinction between the package versions and the release versions. Right now we have them the same, and I think there's no reason to not have them the same that I've seen so far. The release is basically this set of packages with particular versions, potentially a bunch of release notes that are optional at this point. And the cool thing about this, when you create a release, it snapshots the deployment process. And then that release is what we talk about when it gets promoted from development to staging to production to DR. So the deployment process cannot change between the different environments. And so if I actually go in here, say I have this release, the 1.1.144, that was this particular set of NuGet packages with this process. If I go and change the authorized transaction process, when I try to promote this to staging, it's still going to use the old one. Because the whole idea is that the deployment process had to be tested and go through the particular lifecycle. So the deployment process is really part of the deployment. And so if we go in here and change something in the process, this one still has a snapshot of exactly how it was. So we know that something goes to production. If we're running code to deploy in production, we know that that code ran in development, and it ran successfully, and ran in QC, and ran in staging. Any questions so far? All right. So yeah, so the process is like the visual scripting kind of thing. Let's talk about configuration. So the way that the configuration works, you know how Visual Studio has the XML transforms for like web.debug.config and web.release.config that get created by default when you create a new web project in Visual Studio. Those are transforms, so they're basically, you can apply that transform to the web config to change things in it. The way that we do it for authorized transaction, for admin portal, and for the rest of these ones we're packaging up, we just replace entire sections of the config. And so we just say replace all of the app settings, replace all of the connection strings, replace those sections of the config file, replace all of the there was some like Unity settings, I think in authorized transaction that had to be replaced. And so they're basically just a copy and paste kind of thing from the main web config, but you only have to really specify the stuff that's changing between the environments. And so Octopus will actually do that by default, or I'm sorry, it'll do that automatically as part of this deploy step. So when we talk about the deploy here, this XML transforms automatically run configuration transformation files. When you check that box, it's going to look for, so you have web.config, it's going to look for a transform called web dot whatever the name of the environment is .config. And so in IPA now we have like web.development.config, which is used for the dev server, web.staging.config, web.production.config, web.disasterrecovery.config. And it'll apply the correct transform to the web config when it deploys to that environment. So we know that the final configuration file that we have out there is appropriate for that environment. And it also means that we have to do configuration changes. That goes through our normal process. So that's, we treat configuration as code, and so it goes through the process of a review, and it builds a new deployment package with that configuration, and it has to go through the same the whole all of the environments to actually get out the prod. So that's on the process piece. So that's one piece of the configuration. There's another piece of the configuration. If you notice in here, this host header is a variable, because like we saw on here with the bindings on this is different between every environment. itech-qc, this load balancer alias for each application is different between the different environments, but that's not something we have in source control. It's not something in the web config. It's an IAS configuration, so the only place that lives is in Octopus, of like where, what is that alias and that binding supposed to be. And so there's a feature where you can basically, so I say a variable here, website host header, so I don't have to duplicate this step and say this step is only for dev, this one's only for prod. I don't have to duplicate all that. I can just have this one variable, and there's a section here where you can specify variables, and we can specify the scope for each of those variables. So the website host header will have this value for DR, this value for dev, this value for staging, this value for prod. The scoping in here is actually pretty powerful. We can scope per environment. You can actually have machines with different roles. All of our servers so far, since we're only doing web stuff, we just deploy to all of the servers. When we start dealing with like the export jobs and like the crash export service, we're going to have another role in here so we can distinguish the 104 server as the one that's running those export jobs, because those are only installed there. They're not installed on all of the servers. But for right now, but we can scope a variable to a particular role. You can scope the particular machines, and you can scope a variable to a particular step in your build process or in your deployment process as well. But yeah, we're just using it right now for scoping by environment. So that's kind of another piece of configuration in here. Auditability, we actually tracked. This was one of the things that I actually had a demo with the auditors earlier this week. One of the things, basically every single thing that happens in here gets tracked. That script I just added, got tracked in here that it was that I did it. Team City has a service account basically, and so whenever it's pushing new packages in, we're seeing that we have an audit trail of that. So these new package versions are coming in, and it created releases automatically for admin portal and for authorized transaction, and then those got pushed to development. That's on the audit capabilities here. Let's see what else. So let's actually do a deployment, unless anybody has any other questions about stuff. All right, so say we have authorized transaction here. It's already been deployed to dev, so I can show you how we would deploy it to staging. Hopefully it fails, so I can show you what a failure looks like on here. We had one fail Wednesday morning. We had one fail, and it was out of disk space on one of the servers. But it's good to know, kind of what it looks like when it fails. Hold 1 second. So we have this one that was deployed to development. I'll go ahead and promote this to staging. And so that's where you come in here and you click that. It'll say, staging is currently on 131. We're going to deploy 144. And you can go into the advanced and you can turn off specific steps. You can actually schedule it to deploy later, which we may end up using that at some point. But you can actually tell it, I want to deploy at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't want to do this, in the middle of the day. We have that capability kind of built into here. There's a couple other options down here, I'm not really sure what each of these do. The guided failure mode, I've just kind of been using the default of not going into the advanced options and just saying push it to staging. So we hit deploy, and this is what it looks like. So we have the task, it shows for this particular deployment, it tracks this is who did it. So I deployed this release for this project. This version went to staging at this time. And so you can see this high-level log, but we can also dig into the actual task log. And this is the real-time kind of communication. So as this thing is running the PowerShell script on the server, it's communicating back and logging everything that happened to it while it was doing that. And this thing will sit here and it will eventually finish. Yeah, these ones, it took a few seconds for them to actually upload the packages. Then this is unzipping the packages and applying the configuration transforms. This was doing the app pull and website creation.
Hey Dave.
Yep.
What's the user experience right now on that server?
The user experience on it.
Is it shut down, or I mean, I know we'll have load balancers for production, so I guess one of the servers will go down, the deployment will happen, and then the server will come back up, and the next one will go down, and so forth. Yeah,
we haven't completely kind of got that fleshed out on taking things out of the load balancer and then putting them back on. That script that I pointed to, that F5 thing, we have that capability. I think it's a matter of access. I don't think we actually have access to the load balancer to be able to tell it to take our server down or take this server down, and then we wait for all the connections to go away. I believe because we're using sticky sessions and we are you have session state used in a lot of the apps, I think it when you bounce the website, I think it's popping the users off. It's logging them off, so they would hit a login screen next time they do a request.
Well, and two, I guess if you've rolled out a database change, you don't want the 5 servers. There could potentially be breaking changes. You'd have to shut them all down to do a scheduled maintenance or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to kind of figure out how, because with the database changes, we actually have to do an ISIT ticket to the DBAs to do that.
Right.
We can't do database DDL changes, at least in prod.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of that as a prereq that kind of needs to happen before, or that needs to happen before we deploy the code. Yeah. I guess depending on how we structure our changes. So I mean, maybe that informs how we structure our changes, that we're trying to do database changes that require the code to actually be deployed immediately, or the old code's going to break.
Yeah, or backward compatible. So.
Yeah, exactly. And so if we can go that route, it makes it easier, because then we don't have to, we can have the DBAs do their thing. And we could, it may be 2 deployments that we go through to actually get it done. But it makes this process, we don't have to wait for the DBAs and kind of schedule, like, hey, let me know when you're doing this change so I can push out at the exact same time, and then the rollback is harder. It just ends up being easier if we can kind of structure our changes that way.
Yeah. Well, so back to my original question then. So was the site down while this was happening?
Trying to think. So no, because the way that this deploys, I'll show you. We'll go out to the staging server and I'll show you what it does. On the staging server, this does not deploy to www root. And so the way that Octopus deploys it is, so there's an Octopus folder, applications, the environment name, staging, each of the NuGet packages, basically, so each of the web servers or websites. So if I go into, which one did we just do authorized transaction, I think? Well, I'll find out. Yeah, we just did authorized transaction. So the name of the package and then a version number. And so it'll unzip it to this version number, so this is 1.1.144. It keeps the old ones. That in the lifecycle screen was where you could put a retention policy to say save the last 3 versions. And this is kind of a standard process that you would do if you were doing this manually. I mean, you know about this, Dan, from doing
Yeah,
deployments
right.
for
Yeah.
Spillman. You always
Right.
have, you go out there, you don't wipe out the existing production, you do a backup of it and then deploy the new one. So Octopus, we kind of get that built in and it's versioned. And so it'll deploy out here, do its configuration stuff, and then really the change on the IS side is just telling authorized transaction, it's saying, hey, not that one, basic settings is what I want. Don't point to 1.1.144, point to, or 131, point to 144. And so it
Right.
just
Yeah.
points it to the new one.
Yeah.
When that happened, that does bounce the application pool.
Right.
And so basically it's like a restart of the application. If there's stuff that's, cached in memory, it goes away. If there's, if there's sessions that are, it's basically going to be the same thing as if we bounced the app pool.
Yeah. Cool.
Which in IIS applications, supposedly that can happen kind of any time. That's why we do like the delayed submission. We're not doing it as just a task inside an IIS application. It has to be like a separate service if you want it to be reliable, because IIS can shut down your app at any time.
Right.
But with the default settings, it'll kind of recycle app pools, however it's configured to. But the default settings is, if there's no traffic to this thing, it will potentially shut that down until it gets hit again.
Yeah.
So that's how it actually. So the file system structure. This is what the file system structure looks like. And so we have the old versions. We'll probably, at least on the dev and staging, we'll probably only keep like 2 or 3 versions. The auditors did request that we keep all of the versions in prod. So okay, we can do that. As long as you buy the space, we'll keep all the old version. That's fine.
They probably got a few extra gigs on the HPCC where we could store that.
Yeah. Well, for these applications, I don't think, for the websites, it's not, we're not talking giant numbers on the space. And I think they said like a 2-year window, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Right now, it's set to keep all of them on all of my errands. And so we'll probably ratchet that down when we start running into space issues. So that's how it actually deploys out there. If we go and look at this, so it deployed the website, and then it does the configuration transform. So it's all, web staging config is what it transformed this web config file with the web staging config. So that put in all the correct variables for staging. This one, it saw that, this site already exists. Just make sure it's set to the right app pool. Make sure it's set to the right bindings. And that's basically it. .NET Framework version. So if we need to upgrade, a web service that's 2.0 and we need to upgrade it to 4.0, we can come in here and set it on the IIS side. So that way we know what the configuration should be in IIS when we start deploying this. That's the deployment, and then these are the other, those PowerShell scripts, and I guess they spit out some information. It ran that script to create an app pool for the common web service. It says it already exists, so it's just going to reconfigure it, and so it'll just set those properties on it. And this is a 2.0 app pool, actually. And then down here, same thing for like some of the applications. For this web service, the web application already exists. Internal services scan internal. And so just updates the physical path to point there. So that's how things get to staging. And based on the lifecycle that we've configured, technically, based on the lifecycle it's configured, technically you could promote to either production, DR, both. I actually found out this week that we're supposed to wait 24 hours to push to DR. Or something. There's some kind of best practice in LN to wait, so in case something was really messed up in production, they could switch to DR. With that, would still be running the old version. And so we'll probably tweak these life cycles. It has to go to production first, and then we schedule a deployment to DR, to happen in 24 hours. So that way, if it is on fire, we can go cancel that and then and actually switch to DR and be on the old version.
Well, if we're retaining old versions, couldn't you just somehow roll it back right there in place?
Yeah, the LN,
it's the LN policy.
I wouldn't even say it's a policy. It's one of those. This is how we do it on other apps because we don't have, we don't necessarily know that we're always keeping the old version. I guess some of these things may not apply,
Yeah.
depending on how we end up using the tool. But right now it lets you promote to both because of how the life cycle was set up in here. It says, the LN life cycle is dev, staging, and there's 2 environments. Once you get to production, you could actually deploy to either one of those. And that's where it says the retention policy, like how many, okay, I want to keep only the last 3 releases out there, or the last 3 set of files. Any questions so far? Any of that stuff? So for the prod support guys, we're trying to figure out from the auditors if we're still going to have to actually request you guys to so say we got to deploy authorized transaction to production. Is that something that we have to put an ISIT ticket in and request Thomas to go out here and click the button? Or is that, or because we have this tool that's tracking everything and it has audit capabilities, are we able to just have, John do it, or, a dev do it, and press the button and we have traceability back to that person? They're on the hook that, that change had to go through the correct process to be authorized. Thomas, do you know?
I don't know about that, honestly. Sorry, I didn't know. I thought that was a really important question, but I don't know. No, I haven't heard
Gotcha.
about that either way.
So at least from how do you actually do it? If we end up having to do that, of hey, Thomas, go click the button, this is how you go in and click the button. Because you'll end up having a release that's already in staging, and you would come in here and say promote to production.
Okay.
And then that would push it to the production. I actually don't have the tentacle installed on production yet, but Ken is going to take care of that at some point.
From what I've heard, Dave, is it will still require an ISIT ticket.
Mm. Yeah, so. we were going over that with the auditors of how do we actually do that process. But yeah, so that's the process that, as far as how difficult it's going to be for you guys to deploy authorized transaction, you'd come to this website, click there, click promote, make sure everything's green, and then call it a day.
All right.
And you wouldn't have to log into 10 servers, which I guess that's kind of painful for you guys right now.
Yeah,
it's not fun.
Yeah. And so this should really streamline that. And I guess we'll have to figure out how, what kind of lead times we have on ISIT tickets for you guys and for deployments and things like that. But, at least for now, the idea is as we get more of these automated, more of these packages created, we're going to start doing this for our regular sprint deployments at least. So every 3 weeks, we deploy what was in the sprint. We can use this to push it out. And if we have emergency changes that we have to do mid-sprint, we can use this as well. And so the whole idea is that it's not going to be difficult then for us to get our stuff deployed out there. Trying to think, is there anything else anybody wants to, that's kind of it for the tool. The environments, deploying between them, packages, versioning, we talked about auditing. I don't think you guys care about the user management in here. I mean, there is pretty, you have pretty, a lot of granularity on the permissions. And so if we do need a thing of okay, only production support can come in here and actually push to prod, but devs can push to other environments, to non-prod environments. We could actually configure that in here on an environment by environment basis of which environments they can view deployments to, but also actually do deployments. I think inside of here is where you kind of say that. Create environments or create deployments.
Just out of curiosity, Dave, is this going to be moved to a dedicated server at some point?
So we're actually just talking about that this morning. I was talking to John about it, and so right now our dev server that has TeamCity, Octopus, and all the apps are locally deployed to it, and it has SQL Server. The DBA team was not happy that we had a SQL Server installed on there.
Yeah.
They didn't know about. And so they are likely going to be setting up a SQL a dev SQL environment on a machine that they manage, or I guess at least a server that a SQL server that they manage. And so we're going to be pointing like our test lists and everything that's on 001, the dev 001, pointed out to there. What we'll probably do at that point is actually just stand up another Windows server, like another VM. That's going to be the dev server, and we won't deploy our apps locally to where Octopus is. We'll deploy them to that dev server, and then we just wipe out the apps on 001, and we'll just say 001 through 004 are now internal production servers. They're like dev tools, but we need to treat those as production boxes.
Yeah.
But they don't need to be internet accessible, so we can't use the current ones that are in the DMZ pub accounts and all that stuff. So that's the idea. It's still kind of fluid. We're waiting on meetings with the DBAs to kind of figure out when that's going to happen.
Yeah. Off topic, but when we do that SQL migration, will we be getting? Is it possible for us to get production data that's been scrubbed or something?
Yeah. So the reason this actually came up is because analytics. So the reason the SQL DBAs found out about this because we actually requested them to move some stuff from staging down to dev.
Yeah.
So as part of them setting up that dev environment, we're going to want. We think we're going to do all of the databases. I've heard that there's going to be pushback on that because of iScan is like a terabyte or something, and so, but we're actually retiring the iScan application, and so it's one of those we may not get the iScan, like the one that's crazy big.
Yeah.
And we'll ask for the structure at least.
That'd be good.
Yeah, so we at least need the DDL at the very least, even if there's not data in there, but.
But I would be having better data to test with. Like,
yep. Serena has a case out there that you can go and review.
Yeah, I've
scrubbing
seen it.
the PII out of the production data, and that's what we're going to run, so they can just do restore production to staging and to dev and to QC, restore a production database down there, run this script, and there now we have good data that we can work on.
I'm going to be adding a file to change the configuration for dev, and I could use all the help in the world on that too, because I don't know.
Cool. Prod support guys, is this helpful for you guys? Any other questions? I imagine you're going to you're going to have to be working with the tool at some point with it. So you guys should know kind of how it works.
Seeing how it works is helpful.
Yeah. And so I'm pretty pleased with it, from just working on doing the packaging stuff. It seems like there's just a one-time effort to get these packages created and hooked into the build process, and then it's like, free, every time we deploy, we're getting free money back because we don't have to spend hours touching all these servers.
Yeah.
So we're saving a bunch of time by going this route. So I'm pretty pleased with the capabilities in it so far.
Dave, I would think that anybody who's going to work in this tool a lot, and by that I mean more than just pushing the button, like configuring, needs to know how the tool works. But are you writing up some kind of documentation that would give us maybe a cookbook on how to just, here's how to create a new deployment?
No.
Okay.
There is. Gotcha. There is a ton of
documentation.
So there's a lot of documentation about how to do the different things. I've got it to deploy websites so far and web services. We actually have a FogBugs queue out there of all of the deployment cases, and so once we start getting into the Windows services, the scheduled tasks, the other kinds of things that need to be configured on the server, it's going to be kind of specific to the application. So think about if you were going to write a script to deploy that application, or to configure that application once it's been unzipped somewhere. It's basically a scripting task, but you can do it through these steps. It's like we don't really have like a team city of how to create build configs in Teams.
Yeah,
it's something you kind of have to go and look at the documentation on the tool and apply it to what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I get that, and it's all in the tool. So
this is on their website, but it links out to there, and it's like, okay, if you're trying to do, I don't know, there's a lot of kind of crazy stuff out here. This is one of the things, rolling deployments, canary deployments, all the different kind of ways, blue-green, isolated servers, multi-tenant, like things that I haven't even dug into and even tried to kind of understand.
Well, so obviously, so I get what you're saying. I'm wondering, maybe even if not such level of detail, because it's the detail is it's in the code, so to speak. The code is the documentation for what it actually does. But what kinds of deployments we use, like authorized transaction is deployed as a rolling deployment, blah blah blah. Just to kind of, I don't know if that, I don't even know if that'd be helpful. But coming at it green would maybe it would seem to me that something would be of benefit, but
just like a roadmap on it.
Something,
like
yeah.
I don't know. Thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean,
put it on your low priority list. I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what I've been telling. So I've got Justin and Pablo working with me this sprint on packaging up some stuff. So Pablo's going to package up the ACES web services. At least that's his first kind of packaging case for this. And Justin is lucky I gave him pay police ticket, and so he gets an IPA project. That's it's going to be fun. But for both of those, I told him to go start reading through the Octopus deploy docs, and there's actually some videos on the introduction that, I mean, in here they have pretty good documentation about how the system works.
Okay.
And it's basically the same kind of architecture as TeamCity, and so it's pretty simple once you kind of dig into it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like we're already growing experts, and if this is going to be company-wide, there at some point, I'm sure will be someone or some group of someones who are going to be earmarked as dedicated experts. So,
So one of the things that I wanted to accomplish by trying to invite the devs to this meeting as well was because if you have visibility into what the deployment how the deployments happen, it may inform decisions you make on the code side.
Yeah.
And when things the whole idea is once we get everything automated, we shouldn't have to do like RM cases and be like, you have to push out this specific thing. We can push everything, every sprint. Like, why not? It just can go click all of the buttons. So it's not that much more incremental labor, and then we don't have to open a bunch of these tickets.
Yeah. Ken, go get me coffee with all the spare time you have now.
And so the idea is that we can get to that point where we're just pushing everything. Excuse me one second. So yeah, we get to the point where we're just pushing everything every time.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Comments, concerns?
Oh, I guess I had a question about the LEMS, all those files.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What is the plan on that? Is this going to be part of that? I guess I didn't see anything about that in here. Is that going to be on the roadmap for this?
It is on the roadmap. So we have the idea of as far as where Octopus will get it to, you'll end up with when you press the button in here and I say deploy and I'm putting in air quotes, you deploy to production, the LEMS client. Mm-hmm. What it will actually be doing is unzipping into that release folder for you guys.
Okay.
The release folder, and then you guys take it from there to do the update helper and the SVN process and all that garbage.
Okay.
Until we get to the whatever command, until we go back and revisit that entire whole auto update process and how that's managed.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah, so Octopus will get, the package that we'll create out of dev that's a prereq on this. Is we need to there's a master solution, I guess, in IPA that's supposed to have all the LEMS client modules, but it doesn't because there's like a ton of them. So there's a case to get that updated to include everything, so we can say build this, package it up, and then we can run it through Octopus, or we can have TeamCity building it, run it through Octopus. At the end of it, you guys get new files in the release, and then it'll just speed up that whole process of how we get stuff out to agencies.
Yeah, that'll be great.
But it'll be to the point of, you guys take it from there. Once it's pushed to prod and pushed into that release folder, you guys take it from there with the update helper.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Anything else? All right. Well, thanks for attending, everybody, and we're exactly on time somehow.
Nice.
You're amazing.